It might be common for families to have conflicts or financial issues. Yet, there are probably also families who are somehow pulling it together and making an effort to get through everyday life. It's pretty clear which one is happier, don't you think? My name is Michelle. I've been called an oddball since I was a child. I don't know what's different about me. I only think I'm different because people say so. Being called different isn't a problem, but the real issue is being shunned by my own parents. I ended up having a lonely childhood. I have been sensitive to people's emotions and I can somehow read their minds. I don't know why I can do this. It's not like I can always see or feel it, but it's as natural to me as moving my hand or breathing. So I found it strange and couldn't understand why others couldn't do the same. There was a time when I felt a sinister aura or emotion, or whatever you call it, from a colleague my father brought home from work. I warned my mother to be careful with that person, but she didn't listen. Later on, that colleague managed my father into signing a contract as a guarantor for a loan. Although my mother didn't take my advice, when my father stepped away from the table with his colleague, I told him, "Dad, something is telling me that the word joint is dangerous. I don't know what joint means, but please be careful." So, my father hesitated and refused to sign as a joint guarantor. Thanks to that, when my colleague went bankrupt and couldn't repay the debt, my father was able to avoid shouldering all the debt. Another day, when I was shopping with my mother, I felt a wave of discomfort coming from behind us. When I turned around, I felt this wave coming from a man wearing sunglasses and a hat. "Mom, let's take that side street." Saying this, I grabbed my mother's hand and moved to the side street. My mother was confused and asked what was wrong, but just as we moved to the side street, we heard a shout of "Thief!" from the street we were just on. The man with the negative aura had snatched a woman's purse who was walking in front of him and ran off. The woman who had her purse snatched fell over from the momentum and got hurt pretty bad. If we hadn't moved to the side street and continued walking, the man's target would have been my mother. Such things happened frequently, and I was labeled as a strange and mysterious child. And paradoxically, my parents began to avoid me. I was lonely and isolated. What seemed normal to me was not perceived as normal by others. I began to keep my mind to myself, since being the strange, weird, and spooky child is who I am to others. I stopped expressing that, even if I felt something, it was something normal people don't feel. It was because I understood that if I didn't say something, they wouldn't say I was a weird kid, that I was just like a normal kid. I have a sister, Amy, who's 3 years younger than me. Unlike me, Amy's a regular kid. As the years go by, I find myself growing darker, retreating more into my shell. But Amy just gets cuter and more charming. It's clear who anyone would prefer. Our parents clearly started to favor Amy over me. Amy is such a lovely girl, but Michelle seems to be a bit on the darker side. Indeed, Michelle has become less odd lately, but she's still a bit different, isn't she? What they call odd was me refraining from talking about things only I could sense. It was my way of dealing with the world. I was fed up with how this power of mine was torturing me, and I was trying hard to suppress it. I wondered if my attempts to hide myself and appear normal were ironically making me seem abnormal, or if once labeled as the odd kid, the image just couldn't be erased. I grew up without receiving much love from my parents. On the other hand, Amy received all the love, including my share. Amy, who was pampered and raised, sensed my parents being cold and distant towards me. She started to look down on me. "I don't like being around you. It feels like your gloominess rubs off on me. I'm so cute, but your loner image brings me down." She started to insult me whenever she got the chance. Our parents just lightly scolded Amy, but they never seriously tried to correct her. When I was in 8th grade and Amy was in 5th grade, she was scouted by a talent agency on the street. I knew it! It's because I'm cute. They said I could even appear on TV. Amy, pleased with herself, started dreaming big, and our parents didn't seem entirely against it. You should calm down and think carefully. I sensed something shady about this. I spoke up, expressing the intuition that I had long suppressed because I didn't want Amy to get into trouble. Amy, who didn't know about my unique ability, said, "What's your problem? Are you just jealous because you're not cute and nobody approached you? Don't say weird things and stop interfering with me." She seemed furious. Even my parents, who knew about me, either forgot about it or were too excited about Amy standing on the glamorous stage, sided with Amy and criticized me. After that, I resolved to remain silent again. I told myself that there was nothing good in saying unnecessary things. One day, a student teacher came to my junior high school. He was a male college student who graduated from the school and aspired to be a physical education teacher. As he shared his dreams about education and gave a strong greeting, the teacher and students, especially the female students, were charmed. When he responded cheerfully to the girls' excited cheers, I sensed a dark aura from him. I had always vowed to hide myself and not reveal my unique abilities. But seeing my classmates potentially in danger, I decided to break my self-imposed rule. I chose a teacher who seemed understanding and talked to them. "I know this is sudden, but please believe me and help me." The teacher was puzzled by my sudden request, but she agreed to stake out a certain location after school just as I asked. I didn't tell the teacher the details. I had no reason to think they would believe me, but the fact that they agreed to help without any explanation might mean they're not an ordinary person either. And the next day, the school was in an uproar. A male student teacher was arrested for violating a public nuisance prevention ordinance. The location where the teacher staked out was near the girls' restroom, and within 15 minutes of starting the stakeout, the student teacher appeared, entered the girls' restroom, and installed a video camera. The teacher caught him in the act. Thanks to that, female students were saved from being secretly filmed, and their dignity was protected. Meanwhile, my sister, who was scouted by a talent agency, proudly joined the agency, but there were no real lessons or auditions. She only had to pay expensive membership and lesson fees. Then, suddenly, the agency closed down, leaving an empty shell. In short, my sister was scammed. She cried and screamed, directing her anger at me. "It's all because you said weird things! My future is ruined! It's all your fault!" It didn't make any sense, but my sister seemed to truly believe it. Maybe that's the only way she could handle it, but for me, it was a disaster and a nuisance. Our parents didn't say such unreasonable things, but their attitude became more distant towards me and more supportive of my sister. I ended up feeling lonely again, as the odd one out. I was happy that I could help everyone at school, but I was terrified that my actions would corner myself. That's when I received a call from the teacher who had listened to my story, asking me to come to the staff room. Worried that I would be labeled as strange again, I opened the door to the teacher's staff room. "You knew something like that was going to happen, didn't you?" The teacher asked me in a low voice without any preamble. Thinking there was no point in pretending, I gathered my courage and told the teacher about my mysterious power. "I thought so. I know there are very few people like you." For the first time, someone showed understanding for my situation. The teacher said they knew someone with a power like mine, and that's why they could understand. Actually, that person is my aunt, and I've been listening to her stories for a long time. You must be worried about a lot of things because of your power. Maybe getting advice from someone who's been in your shoes will help clear your mind. Saying that, the teacher introduced me to the person. The person looked at me with kind eyes and said, "It's natural to be worried," but you don't need to suffer. I was drawn to their gentle yet deep eyes that seemed to see through everything. The person's name was Haley, and she had the same kind of power as me since she was a child, and she had experienced a lot of struggles and hiding herself throughout her life. The stories from my senior who had gone through the same experiences helped me release my worries and doubts. From this day on, my interactions with Haley began. I called Haley my mentor, but she just gave a wry smile and said, "Please don't." Thanks to Haley, or rather my mentor, I changed. I had been living my life hiding as a quiet, unnoticeable existence. But as my consciousness transformed, I gradually began to live a normal life as an ordinary girl. However, since the incident with the talent agency, I have not been able to reconcile with my sister. If anything, it feels like we're drifting apart. It's become normal for her not to talk to me, and when she does, it's just to complain or insult me for no reason. I often have no idea what triggers her mood switches. My power couldn't predict my sister's emotional changes either. Just because you got into college doesn't mean you're all that. It's not even that great of a level, and you're so happy-go-lucky. My sister, who had been expected to get into her top choice high school, ended up at her second choice safety school. Because of that, she got mad when I got into my first choice college. It's not like I'm full of myself or brag to her. She just disses me because of her own assumptions. Our parents only try to appease my upset sister and keep their distance from me, as if telling me to stay away from her. It seemed that my sister didn't like the fact that I had become brighter since meeting my mentor. To my sister, I had to be a dark and gloomy girl who was inferior to her. But my sister is really smart. It was surprising that she failed her high school entrance exams. Of course, she was filled with frustration, and she poured all of that into studying at her new high school. As a result, she was at the top of her class for all 3 years and got accepted into a prestigious national university in one shot. I got into the most difficult university. Your college doesn't even come close to mine. I lightly responded with, "That's true," to my satisfied sister because I knew there was nothing good to come from getting too involved with her. However, my sister thought that my light reaction was belittling her accomplishments and unleashed a barrage of verbal abuse at me. Both my parents were at their wits' end with my sister, who couldn't be calmed down once she lost her temper, and all they could do was watch nervously. My parents blamed me for causing the trouble and eventually ended up calling me a troublemaker. I wanted to argue back about who the real problem child was, but I always swallowed my words to avoid complicating things further. Setting aside my sister's issues, as I approached college graduation, I had to seriously confront my own career path. Although I was no longer as introverted as I used to be, I still struggled with socializing and had little confidence in building good relationships with others. My ability allowed me to detect people's negative emotions. While I could sense positive emotions as well, it seemed people were more prone to negative ones, which made detecting such negativity painful for me. Throughout my school life, I was tormented by these swirling negative emotions and had come close to losing faith in people. Could someone like me really manage to work at a company? I decided to consult my mentor about this dilemma. I wanted to learn how she had overcome similar issues, as I was sure she had faced them as well. "I have experienced the same worries as you. Maybe you should consider doing the kind of work I do." My mentor used to work as a fortune teller and a counselor, helping people resolve their problems. She could use her abilities to their fullest extent and contribute to the world and people around her. Also, she was able to work freelance, which meant she didn't have to belong to any organization, and there were fewer chances of getting entangled in human relationships or being affected by other people's emotions. "It's the perfect job for people like us." Encouraged by my mentor, I decided to pursue the same line of work. She taught me everything from how to do the job to how to acquire clients. Nowadays, thanks to the internet, it's possible to work from home without any issues. When I told my parents and sister that I would not seek employment after graduation and work from home instead, they responded, "What's that? What kind of job is that? Seems so dumb. You'll be home all the time? At least make sure to do the housework. Can you even make a living doing that? How will you cover living expenses? Well, as long as you contribute to the household, do whatever you want. While I expected such a response from my parents, it made me feel a little lonely that they didn't support me more. I felt sad thinking about their demands for housework and money. My mood darkened, and so my life working from home began. At first, I didn't have any job requests, and I struggled day by day. But with my mentor's help, I gradually got the hang of it and started to make a living. For about a year, I couldn't contribute financially to the household, so I focused on doing the housework. My dad seemed unsatisfied, but my mom was relieved and kept him in check. After about a year, when I finally started contributing financially, my dad mocked me by saying, "Finally, you're able to earn some pocket change, huh?" But I could tell that he was actually quite satisfied with the money. However, even though I was contributing, the amount of housework I had to do didn't decrease, and our lives remained unchanged. Then, after another 2 years, my sister graduated from college and secured a job at a foreign company. Unlike you, I'm an elite. You're just unemployed, living at the bottom of the barrel. It's so depressing to have you as a sister. My sister, who had successfully landed a job, started to belittle me for working from home. What are you even doing working from home? That's just like playing. You're nothing more than a parasite living at home. At times, she'd say, "It's really weird not to work outside. I'm working my butt off, earning everyone's respect, and now I've been promoted to team leader. My pay is going to increase, and I'm probably earning about 10 times more than you. There's no way a homebody like you can earn that much." My sister, who was promoted to team leader after only a year and a half in the company, kept one-upping me and looking down on me. She boasts about her good salary, but hardly contributes any money to the household, and she doesn't help with the chores at all. Laundry, cleaning, preparing meals, everything is dumped onto Mom and me. When I say Mom and me, Mom mostly leaves it to me, so I'm basically carrying everything. Whenever I say to her, "Amy, you should take care of yourself a little. You shouldn't just spend all your money on fun. You should contribute to the household too," she just dismisses me saying, "You, the unemployed, can handle the chores. I'm saving my money for my future." Our parents also just let her do as she pleases for some inexplicable reason of, "It's Amy, can't be helped." I was used to my current lifestyle, and it was a comfortable environment for me to work, so I wanted to keep it that way. But I was starting to consider how to take care of myself. And then came the bombshell announcement from my sister. "I'm getting married!" Without any prior warning, both our parents and I were taken aback as she continued, "He's really rich, a real elite with an annual income of over $20 million. Oh, sorry for finding happiness before you, but marriage is just a pipe dream for unemployees like you, isn't it?" And she said she would bring her boyfriend over the next Sunday. With the rapid-fire succession of sudden developments, Sunday came as we were still reeling. The man my sister brought along looked like a successful young man, impeccably dressed with a sharp suit. "Nice to meet you. My name is Danielle. I would like to ask for your permission to marry Amy." His greeting was completely proper, and he showed good manners. "See? Isn't he wonderful? Just as I said. I'm going to be so happy with this man." "So, Danielle, what do you do for a living?" Dad managed to ask a question while being overwhelmed by the boyfriend's aura. "Yes, I'm currently training at a company that my father knows." We were puzzled by the word training, and then Amy said gleefully, "His father is the president of a company. He's training outside now to take over the presidency in the future." My sister seemed over the moon about the prospect of becoming a future president's wife. Afterwards, we had various conversations and Amy's boyfriend left stylishly. There were a few things that made me raise an eyebrow in the conversation that followed, but my parents were thrilled with the high-spec man. However, I felt an inexplicable, dark shadow from that seemingly refreshing and good-natured man, Daniel. It's something only I can feel, so I don't know how to explain it. However, I could no longer remain silent, fearing that marrying a man with insecurities would make my sister unhappy. Amy, you've only been dating him for less than 3 months, so you might want to understand him a little more before deciding to get married. I had a strong gut feeling warning me of something, but I was unable to articulate it properly. All I could do was attempt to caution Amy using general advice.
What are you talking about, sis? He's an elite and a future CEO. You won't find anyone better than him. Oh, I see. You're jealous, aren't you? You're bitter because you're comparing your life to my happy one. Poor jobless sis.
Even our parents got angry at me for getting in the way of a rich man becoming part of our family. You're just unemployed, so at the very least, stop interfering with your sister's happiness. It was clear to me that our parents were hoping to secure a comfortable old age by marrying Amy off to a wealthy man. Frustrated by my inability to effectively communicate my concern about the dark shadow, I sensed looming over Amy. My head was spinning. In the meantime, the two got engaged, and a meeting between both families took place. Daniel's parents, like him, carried an air of freshness about them, but I felt the same ominous cloud hidden behind them. However, I was unable to convey this danger to my overjoyed sister and parents, and before I knew it, the day of the wedding had arrived.
The CEO of our company is attending today's reception. Can you comprehend how much I'm appreciated and anticipated in my company? I guess it's a kind of honor that a shut-in like you wouldn't understand.
Before leaving the house, my sister gleefully shared this news with me without me even asking. She always included some derogatory words directed at me. At the wedding ceremony, held at a hotel, the couple who pledged eternal love to each other entered the reception hall. Watching my sister, who was beaming with joy, I worried about how long this happiness would last. As my sister mentioned, the CEO made a keynote speech. Naturally, it was full of praise for my sister, which delighted her. Once the speeches were over, food and drinks were served to each table. There were all sorts of delicious-looking dishes, but I started to feel a sense of discomfort gradually. That's because no dishes were being served in front of me. At first, I thought it was just late, but other tables were already being served drinks, appetizers, and so on, one after another. Clearly, something was off. Nothing was being delivered to me. People at the same table began to notice this oddity and started whispering among themselves. At that moment, my sister came over to me and whispered into my ear with laughter in her voice.
We didn't prepare free meals for the unemployed. After all, it's such a waste to serve such food to a jobless person. You should just eat potato chips at home. Just leave your gift money and go home.
This outrageous remark was spoken loudly in my ear, and my ears rang. Daniel, sitting at the groom's table, was grinning and nodding greatly. Even our parents, who at first seemed surprised, said, "Well, it's true. Michelle is jobless after all." I was first taken aback. Then a wave of anger surged up within me. I never thought you'd stoop this low, sis. Mom and Dad, this is unacceptable. How could you accept such rudeness? My parents just scowled at me, never bothering to reprimand my sister. Fine, I get it. I'm leaving, but don't come crying to me later.
What's with the parting shot? The howling of a sore loser, I guess.
Amidst the chaos of this unbelievable turn of events, a man suddenly stood up. Sorry to interrupt, I'm the groom's brother, Kyle. My brother and parents are trash, but it seems the bride is even worse. I can't take it anymore. The man who introduced himself as Kyle continued to speak. Dad, your company went bankrupt 6 months ago, didn't it? Pretending to still be a CEO is just a scheme to mooch off the bride and her family. Daniel will never become a CEO, yet he still plans to leech off his wife while pretending otherwise. After all, he's unemployed now. The man's words stirred up a commotion among the guests, but the person who was most heated up was my sister.
What do you mean? You lied to me? What do you mean unemployed?
A storm of questions with a red-faced expression. Her face gradually turned from red to blue, her eyes welling up with tears. Our parents, their assumptions proven wrong, began to yell and curse. The anguished cries of my family echoed throughout the venue. The groom and his parents remained silent, looking sulky. In reality, before the ceremony, I had received a confession and apology from Kyle and asked him to speak his mind without reservation if something happened during the reception. Then, as my sister was berating Daniel with a wrathful face, another man couldn't take it anymore and stood up. It was the president of my sister's company.
Enough already. This is embarrassing. You have no right to criticize the groom. What do you think about your terrible attitude towards your own sister?
The president's angry voice made my sister's face contort in fear.
For one, I didn't attend your wedding for your sake. I wouldn't have come if you weren't the sister of Michelle.
Suddenly, my name was mentioned by the president, and my sister's eyes widened in surprise.
Huh? Who are you talking about?
Michelle is a goddess to many of us business owners, rescuing countless companies from the brink of collapse. In fact, with the guidance of my mentor, I had been working as an advisor for corporate revitalization and growth, starting with fortune-telling and life consultation. Although I lacked business knowledge, I used my abilities to show companies the path they should take. All my advice was spot on, and the companies that sought my help experienced a rapid resurgence in business, achieving a V-shaped recovery. As a result, I had earned titles like teacher and goddess. My sister's company had also consulted with me 6 months ago, and thanks to my advice, it had been reborn as a stronger enterprise. The president, grateful for my assistance, attended the wedding today as well.
I had no idea! You're not just a basement-dwelling unemployed nobody, are you?
Thanks to my thriving career, I now earn several times what you do. Despite contributing significantly to the household income, our parents never seemed to care about me. I wonder what they thought that money was. Uh-oh, we thought Amy provided that money. The parents seem to have misunderstood the situation. There's no way Amy would have been contributing money to the house. The wedding reception turned into a chaotic scene and was called off. Naturally, all the guests were fully refunded their wedding gifts.
I was planning on using those wedding gifts to pay for the venue. What am I supposed to do now? Besides, I've also been relying on Daniel's income and have already signed a contract for an apartment under my name. I can't afford it on my own, especially now that he's unemployed.
Daniel, in response to his sobbing bride, retorted, "You're the one who signed the contract. I don't know anything about that."
I want to divorce you, fraudster!
The wedding was a complete disaster. It was a result of gratuitous malice towards others. She may argue that there were reasons for her malicious behavior, but there was no way that was going to fly. Afterward, Amy divorced Daniel and claimed alimony. As Daniel was jobless and his parents didn't have much, she couldn't receive much alimony. She barely managed to pay for the wedding venue, let alone the apartment she had contracted. The place that was supposed to be their love nest was never occupied and was canceled. However, the debt didn't simply vanish, and Amy found herself heavily burdened by the loans. Moreover, her outrageous behavior at the wedding was quickly known among her colleagues, which led to a rapid decline in her reputation. The CEO had no choice but to demote her. With no place left in the company and having lost her pride as an elite, Amy wanted to quit and run away, but she had to bear the embarrassment for the sake of loan repayment, continuing with a trivial job in a hardly noticeable basement storage room. Daniel and his parents, who had failed in their plan to leech off Amy, were now scraping by with occasional day labor. Naturally, Sean's elder brother Ethan had cut off all ties with his parents and brother. The parents quickly gave up on Amy when she hit rock bottom and tried to cozy up to me instead. To them I said, "I've had enough of being manipulated by you. I'm cutting ties. Goodbye forever." I declared this and moved out to start a new life in a newly rented apartment. They took in the fallen Amy, who was struggling to make ends meet. Amy's salary was drastically reduced, and she couldn't possibly contribute to the household expenses. Of course, I stopped the money that I was contributing to the house as well. Unable to lower their standard of living, our parents quickly became exhausted and are panting every day. My work is going so well, and I'm able to guide many companies and individuals in the right direction. In fact, I started dating Kyle after the whole wedding incident, and he recently proposed. If things go well, marriage could be on the cards. I'm looking forward to building a happy life with Kyle, a man of pure heart with no dark shadows.
You're already married, aren't you? Going back to your parents' house is just too soft. If you go back, don't ever come back to this house again. Kanae yells this as she blocks my path after hearing that my dad got injured and I was planning to go back home. I just nodded silently. Understood. I won't come back, so I'll go home to my parents. My name is Jessie. Louis, my husband, and I have been together since middle school, and we ended up marrying each other. We've only had eyes for each other since our first love. Both our parents were thrilled with how well we got along, and it helped that they were friends since we're from the same hometown. The reason we moved into Louis' family's house after getting married was because they had a spacious home with extra rooms. We got married right after college and had been saving money appropriately for our age. But both sets of parents told us it would be fine to live together until we saved up some more money. So we ended up living in Louis' family home where a room was waiting for us. Both Louis and I were exhausted from adjusting to our new lives when we started our first jobs. We felt grateful that we could live with his family. My in-laws treated me like their own daughter, and there was absolutely no issue in mine and Louis' married life. That is, until Lyra came back home. Lyra is Louis' older sister, 2 years his senior. She had been mean to me ever since I started dating Louis in middle school. She said things like I wasn't good enough for him, or that he had poor taste. Louis always defended me and wondered why Lyra would say such things. Lyra worked for a company that required her to relocate, and she moved to the city shortly after starting her job. One of the reasons I agreed to move into Louis' family home was because Lyra wasn't there. Another reason I agreed to live in Louis' family home was because Lyra wasn't around. If Lyra had still been living there, I would have flat out refused to move in. However, as fate would have it, Lyra was reassigned to our hometown. When I shared my concerns with Louis, he said, "Lyra is an adult now. She won't say anything weird." True, the times Lyra bullied me were back in high school. After she went to college, she rarely came home, and we stopped running into each other even when I visited the family home. At our wedding, although she didn't speak to me, I remember seeing Lyra crying. It made me think maybe we could get along, but that was a big mistake. After returning home, Lyra acted normally toward me in front of Louis and his parents. I thought maybe she had matured and her edginess was gone. But then, one day when I luckily had some time off, I was enjoying a book in my room. Lyra, who also happened to be off that day, walked into my and Louis' room without knocking. "Hey, how long are you gonna laze around? Could you hurry up and make some food? I'm hungry." Lyra wore a look she'd never show in front of Louis or his parents. Taken aback by Lyra's eyes, filled with what seemed like hatred, I put down my book and said, "All right, let's make some food," and headed to the kitchen. Drinking in the middle of the day, Lyra acted as though I should naturally be the one cooking. She'd never acted this way when Louis and his parents were around. Feeling deceived, wondering if she'd been hiding her true self all this time, I quickly made lunch. Lyra took one bite, then stood up with her plate. "There's no way I can eat something this terrible. Jessie, why did you even marry Louis? He really doesn't know how to pick 'em. Poor guy." Glaring at me, Lyra took her plate straight to the trash. She threw away the food I had made right in front of me. "Go buy some alcohol. After eating your awful cooking, it feels like my tongue is rotting. I want to disinfect it with alcohol, so go get some now." I was pretty steamed, but I had planned on going shopping anyway, so I got her some alcohol. To spite her, I bought non-alcoholic beer. Lyra was furious. I retorted, "Don't treat me like a minion," which escalated into an argument. Still mad, Lyra retreated to her room. When Louis came home, She instantly switched back to her gentle demeanor, a quick change that sent shivers down my spine. That night, I discussed Lyra with Louie, but for some reason, his attitude was cold. Lately, every time he looks at me, his expression is complicated. We used to always share the double bed, but now he's sometimes sleeping on the living room couch. When I asked why, he said, "Just couldn't sleep, so I stayed in the living room." I've been wondering what's going on ever since. I was saddened by his sudden coldness. When Louie said, "Instead of blaming Lyra, don't you think you have some things to reflect on yourself?" I couldn't help but tear up. Since middle school, Louie has always been kind to me, and yet I've been troubled lately by his sudden coldness. Being mistreated by Lyra, and now feeling this coldness from Louie, felt like salt being rubbed into an emotional wound. I couldn't help but cry. Louie looked surprised, but he didn't comfort me. Seeming perplexed, he paced around for a bit before sitting down next to me, who was sitting on the bed with a determined look on his face. "There's something I've been meaning to ask, but haven't." "What is it? Are you having an affair?" I was so surprised by the sudden mention of affair that my tears stopped. I swear my heart has never strayed from Louie. Shaking my head, I say, "No, I'm not. Why would you ask something like that?" Louie then shows me a picture on his phone. The picture shows me talking to a man who has his hand on my shoulder. Both the man and I are smiling, but this is by no means a photo of infidelity. "You're mistaken. Look closely. Yeah, he's put on some weight, but that's Andy, our classmate. Don't you remember him? He was on the baseball team. This was taken when we bumped into each other after so long, and he said, 'You look well,' and patted my shoulder." Louie zooms in on the photo and says, "Really? Andy?" with a skeptical look. Frowning and looking closely at the man's face, Louie asks, "Is that really Andy? Andy is getting married soon. There's no way I'd have an affair. Why would you even suspect that?" "Well, Lyra sent me this picture saying you were cheating. She also said she saw you coming home late with Andy recently. And then she sent me this photo." "Why would you believe Lyra over me? Is that why you've been cold to me?" "Sorry, you have been coming home late and I was worried. I've become a senior at work too, so sometimes I come home late because I'm teaching my colleagues." "I see. Oh, thank goodness. I'm really sorry." Louie breathes a sigh of relief. Slightly tapping his back as a little payback for doubting me, I say, "Geez." Louie says, "Sorry," and apologizes again. From then on, Louie changed his attitude and started treating me kindly like he used to. It was good to get back to being a loving couple, but my distrust towards Lyra increased. I became convinced that Lyra wanted to kick me out of this home for some reason, so I started wondering how to expose her true colors in front of my in-laws. On another day when Lyra and I both had time off, Lyra came and demanded that I make lunch like she used to. "Why can't you be considerate? Do you know what time it is? Hurry up and make lunch," she says, but it's only 10 a.m. It feels too early for lunch to me. "Lyra, you could make something if you want. You cook on your days off, don't you?" "What? Cooking is a wife's job, isn't it? I only do chores to keep the family harmony, you know." Just as I'm getting frustrated with Lyra urging me to cook, my phone rings. Ignoring Lyra, who's been drinking since the morning, I answer the call. My mom's voice comes through, sounding urgent. "Jesse? Oh, thank goodness you picked up. Your dad's in trouble. He tripped at the front door and seems to have hurt his ankle." I can tell from my mom's voice she's really flustered, and I sense this is an emergency for my parents. "I'm coming right now, just wait," I say as I hang up the phone and start to get ready. Lyra, who told me to cook, now looks annoyed as she sees me getting ready to go out and says, "What are you doing?" "It looks like my dad got injured, so I'm going to my parents' house." "What? You're married now, aren't you? Going back to your parents' house is too lenient. If you're going home, don't bother coming back here." I couldn't take it anymore, standing in front of Lyra who was blocking my way out. Why do I have to deal with this kind of spiteful attitude? I was absolutely fed up with being treated so unfairly by Lyra. "Fine, I won't come back. I'll go to my parents' house," I state calmly, and Lyra steps aside with a pleased expression. Don't ever come back! Lyra cheerfully sees me off at the door, her alcohol stench unbearable. Rushing back home, I found my dad's ankle was severely bruised. Mom was visibly panicked, so I drove him to the hospital where they confirmed it was a severe sprain. Due to the condition, my dad had no choice but to use crutches, so I decided to stay with my parents for a while. I thought this was a good opportunity, especially since Lyra had told me not to come back. I informed Louie and my in-laws over the phone about my dad's injury and my strained relationship with Lyra, letting them know that I'd be staying at my parents' home for a while. My in-laws said they would talk some sense into Lyra. Louie then said, "Well, I'll come live at your family's home too." My parents get along well with Louie, so they were pleased, albeit a bit apologetic for the inconvenience. I received a text from Lyra saying, "Why would you tell my parents? Aren't you embarrassed to tattle like a child?" I just read it and ignored it. It seems Louie got a text from Lyra saying, "Aren't you coming back? Living at Jesse's family home must be tough." Louie responded, "I'll go where Jesse is," and we didn't hear from Lyra after that. My dad's recovery was slower than expected. He spent about 3 months on crutches and in a wheelchair. My dad seemed both grateful and happy for Louie's various help around the house. Just when I was feeling grateful for being married to Louie, Lyra sent a shocking message my way. "I'm bringing my boyfriend over. Since you're technically my sister-in-law, you have permission to come home for just 1 day. Be polite and greet him properly. Don't say anything unnecessary." I felt repulsed by the selfishness of her text, but the message Lyra sent to Louie was even more off-putting. Her message said, "My boyfriend is coming to greet the family, so come home, Louie. I might be getting married, but you'll always be important to me." Louie commented, "Lyra's texts are always so poetic, aren't they?" But thanks to my woman's intuition, I had a good idea of how Lyra really felt about Louie. To protect Louie and our marriage, I decided to turn this meeting into a stage for my revenge, regardless of how Lyra's boyfriend might feel. After being allowed to return to my in-laws' house after a long time, I received multiple apologies from them. They told me Lyra was going to pick up her boyfriend and that they'd make sure she apologized to me afterwards. "Oh, it's fine as long as Lyra stops being malicious. That's all I really want," I replied with a genuine smile. Plus, I'm sure that after my revenge, Lyra won't dare to be nasty to me anymore. The man Lyra brought with her seemed serious enough, but what shocked Louie and my in-laws the most was how much he looked like Louie. From the aura to the facial features, they were identical, leaving my in-laws exchanging surprised glances. It was clear that Lyra's boyfriend also noticed the resemblance. As he stood there in surprise, Lyra cheerfully said, "Come on in, come on in." Louie whispered to me, "Isn't that guy way too similar to me?" "I told you so, didn't I?" was my reply. I had let Louie know beforehand that I was planning some revenge. Louie had told me I didn't have to go that far, but when I explained my reasons, he seemed torn between believing me or not. However, after seeing the guy's face, Louie seemed to finally understand why I felt the need for revenge. Though the awkward expression on Louie's face showed his mixed feelings, my resolve to make Lyra learn her lesson the hard way was reaffirmed. "My name is Jackson. I'm considering marriage with Lyra. Nice to meet you all." My in-laws welcomed Jackson's polite introduction with smiles. Lyra seemed really happy and started downing drinks like there's no tomorrow. Jackson, who had seemed a little tense, started to relax more, thanks to my in-laws' warm demeanor. As we all were engaged in light conversation, a tipsy Lyra rested her head on Louie's shoulder, not Jackson's. "Ah, this is fun. Louie, you must be feeling lonely, huh, knowing that I'm getting married?" "No, not at all. You know, Jackson here looks just like Louie. That's why I thought about getting married." The resemblance between Jackson's face and Louie's had been the elephant in the room, something nobody had mentioned until now. But Lyra, probably due to being intoxicated, not only brought it up but also revealed that it was her reason for considering marriage. The atmosphere changes immediately as Lyra's words turn my in-laws' faces pale. Lyra, realizing she may have said too much, tries to laugh it off. "Just kidding!" But I didn't let this opportunity slip away. "Lyra, you can't be serious." Before my father-in-law can say anything more, I interrupt. I can't bear to let this sad tale come from my in-laws' mouths. And more importantly, I need Lyra to realize that Louis is my husband, not just a family friend. Jackson, did you know? I hate to spill family secrets, but Lyra and Louis are not actually blood related. My in-laws had children from previous marriages and then got remarried. What? He looks at Lyra in surprise. Lyra quickly puts distance between herself and Louis and glares at me. Undeterred, I take out my phone and place it on the table. I've had my suspicions for a while. Lyra has been treating me poorly, and I've wondered why. As I say this, I press the play button on the voice recorder app on my phone. What flows out are the sounds of Lyra berating me. The recording is filled with Lyra's desperate voice saying things like, "Break up with Louis," and "Leave this house." Realizing the gravity of the situation, my in-laws utter in despair, "This can't be." But I turn to Lyra, who is now biting her lip and pale as a ghost, and give her a smile. "Lyra, you've had feelings for Louis for a long time, haven't you? That's why you've been trying to drive me away." "No, that's not it. Louis is my precious younger brother." "Then why did you plan to marry Jackson because he looks like Louis?" "Well, that's... Jackson, you told me that you met Lyra in a bar, right? What was that encounter like?" Caught off guard by the sudden question, Jackson replies with a trembling voice, "We met while I was drinking at a bar. She told me she liked my face. That's how it all started." My mother-in-law lets out a sorrowful, "Oh," and starts to cry, while my father-in-law looks at Lyra with a serious expression. Lyra's biological father, my father-in-law, finally broke his silence. "Lyra, did you have feelings for Louis?" The heartfelt greeting I had prepared for Lyra's future husband was because I'd realized she had her sights set on Louis. Although Lyra herself never admitted it, her behavior over time made it increasingly obvious that she saw Louis not just as a brother, but as a man. While I had hoped it wasn't true, I grew more and more certain that their relationship was more than sibling affection. Suddenly, Lyra bursts into tears and buries her face in the table. "I couldn't help it. I've loved him ever since our parents got married when I was in elementary school, and I met Louis. There are stories like this in girls' comics, you know, where the parents remarry and their children start dating. I had always dreamed that would happen with Louis and me, and then you came along and stole him." Jackson, listening to Lyra's tearful outburst, starts to complain of a headache and says he's leaving. Lyra clung to Jackson, but her father intervened, saying he'd go apologize to Jackson later. Lyra was clearly distraught, crying uncontrollably, but neither Louis nor I could do anything to console her. "Lyra, I've always seen you as a real sister, but that's all it's ever been." With those words, Louis addressed Lyra, who was sobbing uncontrollably. For a moment, her cries quieted down, but then she burst into loud, childlike sobs again. I felt some pity, but it didn't change the fact that Lyra had been mean to me. Relieved that I had gotten my revenge, and that Lyra would no longer be pursuing Louis, we left for my parents' home. Later, we learned that Lyra had been diagnosed with alcohol dependency at the hospital. She was also found to be mentally unstable and had taken time off work to isolate herself. After talking it over with my in-laws, Louis and I finally decided to move out and start our life together. My in-laws kept apologizing to me, but I told them there was no need. Love can make people do crazy things, after all. I couldn't forgive what Lyra had done, but I did feel sorry for her. I hope she can move on from her feelings for Louis and find a new direction in life. Louis and I got off to a great start living together. We rented a house close to both our parents so we could easily help them if needed. Starting this new chapter brought back the excitement we felt as newlyweds. Louis and I plan to continue being a loving couple and live happily ever after.